What's up everybody, Roberto Tan here, the Inspired Entrepreneur, and today we will be talking about how to shoot photos on your DSLR in manual mode. If you love photography like I do and want to learn some tips and tricks as a beginner, then do not forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click on that notification bell so you will be notified for future videos. Okay, let's get started. Just a disclaimer, I myself am a beginner photographer and have been watching tutorials from the pros on YouTube and on Skillshare. What I am about to show you in this video is what I have learned so far and have been practicing since. In the beginning, I thought that it would be really hard to learn how to shoot in manual mode, but as we proceed with this video, you will find and be surprised as I was at how simple and easy it is to learn. It just takes continuous practice. Okay, so to start this all off, there are only 3 things you need to remember when shooting manually: the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO, and how they all work together like a well-oiled machine. To break it all down, the aperture is the f-stops you see here. This has more to do with the lens than the camera itself. This will determine how much light enters the camera when you shoot. The higher the aperture, the less light is allowed in, and the lower the aperture, the more light is allowed in. It might get confusing at first, but if you continue to practice, you will get the hang of it. As you can see here, the higher the aperture, the darker the photo becomes, and vice versa. More light means brighter photo, and less light means darker photo. Another aspect of the aperture is that it will also determine the sharpness or blurriness of your photo's background. The lower the aperture, the background of your subject becomes blurry or less focused, usually used when taking portrait photos of a single person. The higher the aperture though, everything, even the background, becomes sharper and more focused, mostly used for group photos or landscape photography. Next is the shutter speed. This determines the amount of time the sensor of the camera gets exposed to the light. The faster the shutter speed, the less time the sensor is exposed, and the slower the shutter speed means the sensor is exposed at a longer time. So faster shutter speed means darker photo, and slower shutter speed means brighter photo. The other aspect of the shutter speed is how it is used. If you are shooting fast objects like people running or kids playing and you want to get a focused shot without motion blur, then you would have to use a faster shutter speed. Now, if you want to shoot with motion blur, you would do the opposite and lower the shutter speed. Some photographers, for instance, like the motion blur look of a waterfall, so they lower the shutter speed. But in doing so, you have to make sure you are using a stable tripod. Now let's move on to the ISO. The ISO changes the camera sensitivity to light. So if you increase the ISO, your camera sensitivity to light increases. And the lower the ISO, the less sensitive your camera becomes to light. But in the case of this function, it's always best to keep the ISO as low as possible, because the higher the ISO you use, the more grain you will have on your photograph. And that is a no-no in the industry, because then your shots become unusable. Plus, it does not really look good unless you really want to get that effect. So now that you know the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO, which are the 3 most important functions, you now just need to practice and do your own mix and match to create the perfect exposure depending on what you want to photograph and the environment that you are in. Remember, practice makes perfect. A little tip: there is a guide in the camera that shows whether your shot is perfectly exposed or not. Look at this. Now, knowing how to shoot manual allows you full control of your camera and use it to its full potential. But it does not mean that you should not try using the auto mode. There are also functions in the DSLRs which allow you to be in auto mode, but also with some control. For instance, aperture priority, where you set the aperture you want and then the camera will mix and match the ISO and shutter speed around your specific aperture to set the right exposure. Shutter speed priority. Here you set the shutter speed you want and the camera will do the rest in setting the aperture and the ISO to give you again the best exposure. Of course, it will take a little time to get used to shooting in manual mode, but with continuous practice you will find that it will be easy to use, and if you master the 3 settings you will be on your way in taking better photos in the future. I hope in my own little way that I have helped you to understand the manual functions of the DSLR and understand photography that much better as you begin your journey as I have. Comment below if you want to see more videos like this, and do not forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell so you will be notified of future videos. That's it from me, the Inspired Entrepreneur. Thanks for watching. I'm out of here.